Welcome to What Drives Us number 503. I am your temporary host, Georgia McKenzie, and I'm joined by the gloriously beautiful panel of Casey Green, Mark Coughlin, and Paul Gizik. And we are here to talk about a lot of things tonight because we are doing a different thing. We're doing a round table kind of panel discussion of a couple of issues. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and then we'll move right on in it. Casey,
Hey everybody, what drives us? We are live to tape today because our friends at YouTube decided to close our portal right after Mr. Frost decided to, go on his trip, and we were good. And then YouTube said, "Ha!"
They said, "You no parental supervision. You guys got to go. You can't hang around our mall."
Exactly.
So they put us on the 15-minute
That's why you're
delay.
seeing us now on the video tab instead of the live tab.
I don't know why. We're pretty cool people. All right. Next up, Paul.
Hey, I'm Paul Guzik with Boulder Hybrids in beautiful Boulder, Colorado.
Looking sunny there, Paul. Looking good.
It's a little cloudy, rainy, but it's been nice-ish.
It's bright anyways.
Yeah.
It's way better than New York right now. New York and the eastern seaboard and parts of Canada. Mark,
yes.
How are you doing?
Speaking of Canada, how are you all doing today? And yes, we're spreading our smoke clear across the continent, all different areas, not only where I live in Ontario, but into the eastern seaboard and down to the Midwest. And don't you worry, California, we'll get out your way soon.
Oh, no, thank you.
We had your smoke a couple weeks ago. So.
Oh, man. I've seen the pictures, and it looks exactly like when we had the really bad forest fire year. I think 2019, 2020. Orange haze everywhere. Oh. And I have friends and my family is in New York, and I have friends ranging up and down the coast, and a ton of them are just like, yeah, it's just orange and stinky. So stay indoors for those of you who are in New York. Settle back, have a drink. Use your KN95. So if you got to go out while we got this kind of AQ index of 200, please don't be like the stupid people at the Equinox in New York City doing rooftop yoga.
Wow, this is strenuous activity after the mayor told us to stay inside because the air quality is
they're on top of a skyscraper, and they're all very well off because they can live in Manhattan. So therefore, obviously, money protects your lungs. It doesn't. All right, on to our first article that we are going to be talking about. Stanford study warns against overnight charging of electric vehicles at home. This is from the Brighter Side News, and this was based on a study that was published in the Journal of Nature Energy. So this is talking about the increasing numbers of EV ownership in the Western U.S. and the potential strain on the electric grid by 2035. So what do you guys think about this? The basic premise is that, hey, you don't want to be charging everything overnight. You want to do this during daytime at public charging stations or at your workplace. I can see a few problems.
I see there's a large problem with it because because of course EVs are made for charging overnight. You've got different charge windows, of length, but really it's perfect for people that plug in. And, 4 to 8 hours later, their car is fully charged, just sitting at home. And of course, the grid is used less in the evening in all cases, no matter where you are.
Yes.
There's less activity after 7 or 8 p.m. across the board. So not sure why this Stanford study is actually pushing this. It's because that is the best time of the day to charge. And we're talking about California here. I would hate to charge at some time during the day with the rates that you have to pay for in California. Like
who funded
it's insane.
The California Utilities Consortium?
Exactly.
That's the amazing thing is the utilities and the car companies are the ones telling us to charge at night. They're like, hey, we've got capacity. Hey, we made them slow charging. Do it at night. And
well,
then this study comes out.
Answer the question of who funded this. This is the Cal Energy Commission and the Bits and Watts initiative from Volkswagen. So it's jointly funded. A full disclosure, I have done work for the Cal Energy Commission. On a different level of energy, sustainable lighting, and so it's a complicated thing because I get the point they're trying to make. They're actually saying, when you read through the article, they're saying that due to the fact that we have put so much effort into solar, that what we should do is shift towards daytime charging so that the surplus we have during the day is used and we're not putting strain on the grid at night. Now, that's great, but one of the problems with an academic answer to a real world question is that there's a ton of variables that are not necessarily calculated for. One of which is a very simple question. Where are all these damn public chargers that we're supposed to be taking our cars to during the day? Are they close to our jobs?
Electrify America, baby. They did say charge at work, but
does your job have
my
it?
very last on-prem job, my very last on-prem job did have 7 of them, and you had to pay out of pocket to make them work. Previous jobs prior to that, they actually get it for free. So like, that would be fine. But if I'm going to pay, and like Mark said, you're paying the California daytime rates. I get that they want to flatten the duck curve and use some of that available solar, but you know what else needs to be used when the sun is up high? Air conditioners.
Yes, especially during summer. We are lucking out a little bit. We had a weird jump to 90-degree weather back in April, and then we went back down, and now we're in the mid 70s, which is unusual for us, June through into July. But we're lucking out. We have a little bit of cool weather. But what happens when we're dealing with our normal, especially here in Northern California, where our summer 90s and up can stay into October? So what then? The strain on the grid is, from AC and all that, it's huge. Trying to keep things cool.
I would also say that
I get what they're saying. Put it in a battery so you can use it later.
Yeah, but okay, Mark.
So you put it in a battery so you can use it later. I get that, but if it's on all these people's private cars, you can't load shed. You can't control how fast those cars are sucking down the power. I mean, there are a few installations where you can tell the charging station, hey, slow it down, but they're not common. What would be a better battery to put that in is something like you've got like 25 like large scale battery lithium liquid and other types of battery companies there in California, like Tesla and Redflow and a bunch of others. Why not store whatever you're not dumping into air conditioners? Store it in some sort of large scale utility scale battery, and then you don't have to run the peaker plant at night when demand is lower.
So what were you thinking, Mark?
I was thinking that it's great to say we want to use the solar that's produced during the day, and that's fine. But the question is, or the problem is that the rates have to reflect that.
Yeah.
You have to build an EV rate in place, or you have to have certain people apply for an EV rate, and then they have EV rates from where they are. Otherwise, as Paul mentioned, the different times of day would kill you when it comes to charging a vehicle. Right. Like that's probably the most electricity you would use in your household over anything is charging your EV, and doing that at a ridiculous rate of 35 or 45 cents a kilowatt hour is just going to break people. They're not going to do it. I know that here in Ontario, the government tried to push us to the evening because demand was low, and they did that by lowering the rates at night, and everybody followed. That's all it took.
What a concept, right?
Yeah. So if you make it penny wise to follow what the power groups want you to do, people will do it. They will follow where the money goes. Mm-hmm. So that's what they need to do in California. It may be a little bit different because, again, they want to use up maybe some solar energy during the day, but maybe block out a 4-hour window in the middle of the day from 11 till 3, and that is solar time, and everybody gets a cheap rate at that point, if that's what you want to use up.
Right.
There's also, to my mind,
the other problem with that. Go ahead.
To my mind, this is foisting a public infrastructure problem onto the public for a solution, and they're asking for us to change behaviors. Meanwhile, the actual issue is that if we're getting all this solar and we don't have adequate storage on our grid and we don't have the updated grid, then isn't that an investment issue that you need us to do more than a behavioral shift that we have to do? Because there's 3 problems, and Casey, you brought that up with your example. If your employer has it there, who's paying for it? Is that an employer benefit?
Are there enough of them?
Or is that an employee cost? Because you've had it both ways. And for a lot of people, the investment in an EV to then have to turn around and pay into a charging system for work just so they don't have to plug it in at home to ease up the California grid, then why buy the EV? Because you're still adding on to the cost. Then who's responsible for maintaining it? What happens if it's down or if it's out or anything else like that? And again, location. These public charging networks or an employer provided one, who gets first access? How does the employer handle that? Because if you have 7 chargers and even 50% of your workforce, so let's pretend you're talking 100 employees in the workforce, and if 50%, so that's 50, have to use the charger, who gets access first? How long do they get to stay there? How long do they charge just to top off so they'd be able to go home? But that doesn't resolve the problem of charging up the car for use. Is it a rotating thing?
What if it's full in a meeting?
Yeah. This solution of not charging at night to save costs on the grid and make things easier for California is a foisting off of a problem, to my mind. And then my question, and I'm going to actually have to direct this over to Paul and to Mark and Casey, but primarily Paul. For so many cars, don't the manufacturers, Casey mentioned that, the recommendation is to charge overnight. Now, when we're talking about being able to only charge it in short dribs and drabs, let's say that you come up with the idea that you get to charge your car for 2 hours because it's, maybe it's a supercharger. Okay, your employer is going to pay for it. It's a supercharger, and it should give you maybe a quarter of what you need to top off your battery. But how does that affect the car battery over the life of the car? Are you shortening the life of the car? Because for some electronics, if you don't cycle the battery properly, you don't get the best performance out of the battery and you speed up its demise. So I'm going to throw that out to you.
Yeah, definitely. If you charge at a lower rate over a longer time, it's less stressful on the battery than doing a supercharge, dump it all in half an hour, which you do on a road trip. But day-to-day use, and I'm sure Mark and Casey owning Teslas, you'd agree that it's just better for the car to charge it a little slower over the nighttime period, which, obviously the real answer is it depends. There's a lot of variables, but in most parts of the country, the grid has plenty of capacity overnight, especially in the summer. People are not cranking their air conditioners, businesses are closed, so the grid isn't powering all those businesses from, midnight till 6 a.m. So to me, it makes sense to incentivize people to charge in that time period while the car's at home. Also, the car itself won't be as hot because it's not in the sun, so it doesn't have to run battery and cooling systems to keep the battery cool while it's being charged. especially if it's in your garage at home.
Whole nother air conditioner.
Yeah. So, if you're charging a Tesla in an August afternoon outdoors in the sun, it's going to use part of that energy to keep the battery cool while it's charging itself, which is kind of stupid. So
I want to point out one other thing that the study seems to have glossed over. I haven't seen any articles on these grid-tied systems. If your grid is out of standard by any amount, it will pause your solar output or reduce it depending on how far out of variance it is. And we haven't seen, that I've noticed, any articles saying about mass shutdowns from any utilities of shutting down people's rooftop or solar farms, asking them to put out less yet. I mean, we have heard the articles about the duck curve and how, oh my goodness, it's so hard for us to deal with it. But again, as Georgia said, that's a infrastructure problem. Like, hey, we need to get the right equipment in to handle it. But I haven't seen them shut down solar because they couldn't handle it yet. So is this truly a problem, or is it just more efficient to use it on site than to store it or transmit it?
Or is this a future problem?
I think it's a future problem.
Right.
This is a gamed out future problem. But one of the things that I think that, based on my reading of the study, and granted, this is a boring ass study to sit here and read.
It was.
I say this as a person who has attempted many times to read through what I got from CEC to create stuff. The thing is, I think that the nature of work is changing. I think society is changing how we do things, especially in California. The ability to be flexible. We're currently in the middle of like a weird little worker revolt summer over a lot of things right now. And it would not surprise me that the ability to maintain some level of work from home will affect our driving patterns. It will affect the charging patterns and the level of investment that we're willing to make here in California and nationwide, including through the Inflation Reduction Act in the network of chargers coast to coast. We have not yet actually seen that investment dollar come back to us in the form of the actual chargers. That's all still being worked out. It takes a long time to get these developments done. So I respect the work that went into this. I see their point. I fully understand. Living with me for many people is often the first time they have somebody talk to them about phantom power. And I tell people all the time, hey, I know exactly when our peak rates are. So these are the times where you can use the higher intense use objects like the laundry machine. You don't do it during these times and not these days because that's all peak. But and also things like passive cooling and different ways to manage our energy use. So I'm there with you. But once again, we kind of have to understand that there's a balance. And this study feels really unbalanced. And it feels like they're trying to predict a future and resolve a future problem without really actually taking into consideration, but are people really capable of doing that for everything that everybody here listed? And I mean, I don't think I'm alone in saying that while we respect the work and we see what they're trying to do, that I think we're all pretty agreed that, nah, this ain't it. Come back with something else.
I also want to add that it feels a lot like the arguments that these either politicians or utilities are making against us having rooftop solar, where they're saying, oh, it's unfair that Casey's got solar, he's taking it from the poor people. I have the same effect by just turning off my lights. And am I taking from the poor people by turning off my lights because I didn't use your predicted profit level of lights because my house is this size? It's not a fair argument. And they try to get us at each other's throats when really it's a matter of they don't make the expected profits they want. They don't want to make the investment in the infrastructure. So maybe we should reutilize them and have a government set a rate for them and have a certain level of maintenance, and then they don't have to worry about their profits.
Yeah, that'll go over well.
It won't, but It would also fix the problem, but it would actually do it the right way instead of trying to dump it all on us.
Well, and a lot of
if it was our problem that they didn't maintain their grid.
A lot of consumers
with the money that we already gave them.
Home use the same type of circuit that runs their electric clothes dryer. So, it's not taking that much energy out of the grid. Now, if everybody does it at the same time, it could impact the grid a bit, but not really. At nighttime, the grid has plenty of capacity to run clothes dryers and everybody's. You never hear, everybody
drives get home at 5:05.
Close it at 9 o'clock at night and the grid collapsed. It doesn't happen. So I'm not sure what the root of this study is trying to prove.
Okay, awesome. That was actually pretty fascinating discussion. And you know what? We're probably going to have a lot more of those because I can see as we do have more cars that need charging, we're going to be talking a lot more about the fact that we don't have enough chargers and we've got to figure out ways to get people to charge effectively. But
one more thing with that.
What?
Every electric car mile, or I should say every gas car mile, uses the same amount of electricity as every electric car mile because you had to refine that electricity, you had to refine that gasoline and then get it out to the place and pump it. That's something that we always gloss over as if the gasoline just magically pops into the tank.
It's possible truth right there, but I'm actually going to use it to segue to this next story. Wyoming. Hey, Wyoming. What's happening with you? Wyoming.
Why?
This is why. Oh, lying. Oh, God.
Parts of their face filming.
I mean, they do have a pretty, crappy economy, and it's heavily dependent on oil and gas. And the lobbyists and the politicians and the businesses in that state are kind of tied to oil and gas. So maybe that has something to do with what you're about to talk about.
Well, all I'm saying is don't be the Florida of the Midwest. All right.
Before you tell us what happened, I want to tell them how I proposed the story. So I said Wyoming versus EVs again. If you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, that they tried something. They tried to do an anti-IRA bill where they wanted to ban all electric cars because they felt that we were forcing them to drive electric cars by 2035.
So instead, they decided to ban it. All right. Well, Wyoming has put the brakes on an EV charging station build-out plan. What the hell, guys? Basically, what does it say? Well, it's the federally funded program. What the hell? It's not even Wyoming's money. It's our money,
right?
That we as a collective society have decided is a smart use because we want to plan for a future without oil and gas. Because you know what the problem is with oil and gas? No matter how much is here on the planet, it is still a finite supply. Mind blown. So we planned.
Didn't OPEC just decide they were going to release less barrels?
Who cares? Still a finite source. Yeah. If you got 10 gallons and you're going to drink it 1 picoliter at a time, you still have a finite source. And we made a choice. So the federally funded plan, Investment Reduction Act, thank you, Joe Biden, to build electric vehicle charging stations across Wyoming, it's on hold because the state is basically saying, but what if the stations are abandoned because they don't make a profit? All right.
Free market are abandoned because we succeeded in banning electric cars in our state.
Yes. So they're offered, Wyoming gets $24 million to build 17 charging stations along the interstate corridors. And once again, interstate.
That's a lot of money.
That means roads that cross from one state to the next. So technically, not their roads, okay? Our roads.
Right.
The program requires a 20% match from private businesses, and they will be the builders and operators of the stations. The feds will kick in operation money to support the stations for 5 years. Program requires no state money. I'm going to repeat that to you. The sum of monies required from Wyoming, zero. It's a big circle. It's a goose egg. It's no money from Wyoming. So after 5 years, the businesses are on their own. So the Wyoming Department of Transportation says, hey, man, but what if they don't profit after 5 years? They might not be profitable for 20 years.
No different than a gas station going out of business in 5 years.
Yeah.
Someone else buys the property and does something with it.
Yeah. So they said that if the legislation that they say they need is that if the station owner decides to not continue running the station at the end of the 5 years of operational support, the owner could ask the station to be removed from the property. And then the state would have to pay for the removal and reimburse the federal government for any federal money used to construct or support it. And so they don't want to be on the hook for that cost. And so they pulled back and said, "No, we're not going to do it."
Wow.
It sounds reasonable, their argument on the face of it, but then you remember, this is a government. All they have to say is, if you take this money and you decide to close it down, you or whoever buys the land from you when you go to business is responsible for paying back the federal government for the entire amount that they would be looking to us to have collected. We wash our hands of it. We already didn't have to put anything in it to begin with. Done. And with it being Wyoming and anti-EV, did the federal government even say that? Is the next question.
Well, and Wyoming is the most, what's that word? Low population state in the country, and it's quite a large state. I actually drove through Wyoming on Sunday, and there's a whole lot of nothing there. And unfortunately, I did see a Tesla on the side of the highway that I'm sure ran out of power in the middle of nowhere and was waiting for a tow truck.
It is.
Wow.
And to support Paul's statement, population of Wyoming is 578,803. In New York City, that is a high school class.
Yeah, there's more people in Alaska, more people in Hawaii, more people in Vermont, more people in Maine.
In Montana.
Colorado, we're just down the road from Wyoming, has 10 times as many people as Wyoming in our state.
Each of your cities. Each of your cities.
So it is a small or a low population state with a big geographic area, but you have to go through Wyoming to get to other places.
Yes.
And you think they want tourists to come through and stop in their cities and towns and hotels and restaurants and charge their cars. But now what they're trying to say is, well, we won't have chargers, so you can go around Wyoming to get to where you're trying to get to.
That's going to do wonders for their economy.
Yeah, because they have oil, gas, and a bit of tourism, and not much else. Maybe some.
Yeah, let's get rid of the bit of tourism and see how we survive.
Yeah.
The number of the population in Wyoming and their ability to deter tourists from coming through their state, they might be connected. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. They might be connected.
Right.
I mean,
but the other problem with that is for the states that neighbor them. Now, depending on where the rest of the chargers are, does that prompt them to avoid their neighbors as well? I mean, it's fine if they shoot themselves in the foot, but are they hurting their neighbors or?
Well, I mean, maybe this will be an opportunity for private enterprise. Maybe some of the truck stops or whatever will put in their own chargers, and they'll charge a bit more, but they'll say, hey, if you got to drive through Wyoming, stop at Love's Truck Stop and you can refuel your Tesla here or whatever.
I found it interesting that basically the article says, well, the problem is the federal government just isn't considering Wyoming's special need as a rural state. And it's like, Okay. So you went there. They offered flexibility on locations, and then you turned it down because you said it cost. At no point have you said clearly that it's because they weren't thinking about rural nations. All we see here is, well, we might be on the hook for it in a few years or something. And we don't know how many of these will succeed. So
Possibly, maybe.
let's not pretend here, Wyoming. I think the problem is they're not showing the flexibility of being an ultra conservative right wing government that is opposed to EVs and putting out this plan in general. Well, let's not beat about the bush. Come on, just be upfront and honest. I prefer the honesty. Let's not waste time. You don't want it there because you don't want EVs. I believe there's a track record we can look at when we talk about your state and your state legislature and its friendliness to EVs. Call me crazy, but when people try to ban you, it does not sound like you're a fan of them.
Well, and again, oil and gas is probably buddy-buddy with the government. I just Googled, Wyoming has 5 oil refineries presently.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado has 1. Colorado's 10 times the size of Wyoming. We have 1 oil refinery in the state. And unfortunately, probably a lot of our oil and gas comes from Wyoming and other adjacent states. And so you've got to wonder, in a state that's that small population-wise and that's that big of their industry, they're pulling the strings in the government.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean,
but
the funny
thing,
thing,
make electricity from oil.
I did see a few windmills, which I was impressed driving through one because it is a very windy state.
Yeah, that's the funny thing to me. It's called pivot, people. Y'all can do better than this. You can do so much better than this. And it's interesting to me how conservatism shouldn't mean reactionary, incapable of absorbing new information and taking a new direction. That's not what conservatives should mean. It is okay to say, why not have more wind farms? Wyoming should be the wind farm capital of the US. Tons of places that you can put. Nevada should be rocking on solar. Texas should be rocking on both. Why?
Didn't the conservatives invent the EPA?
Yes.
Because they were conserving nature?
They would not be considered to be conservatives anymore. Conserving actually used to be part of being a conservative, and a good part of the EPA and a lot of our national monuments and protecting them come from Republican proposals. But that's your dad or your granddad's, conservatism, and that is not the modern day conservatism. And it's a very weird situation. Let's put it that way, because I mean, I feel bad for Wyoming. Granted, you tell me Wyoming, I see ranchers. I think beef. I don't even think about oil and gas. Right. I think basically everybody is leading a head of 400 cattle just when they're going to the grocery store. It's just like a cattle moving. It's one of those places that seem nice, but I figure I'm going to have to fight off some cows. It's a mistake. It's a mistake. It's a mistake even if you went back and said, hey, let's do less of these, or let's make sure that they're carefully spaced out and can be run automatically. Because as Paul said, you got Mr. Tesla driver stuck on the side of the road. Hey, what if on the really empty stretches, we did what California has on some of these? We have these check-in stations where you can rest and you can sleep, and we locate a charger. We do that here. I know we do that in other states. Why not? Wonderful. Let's do that. But to take, everybody often says that if you give them enough money, they'll be fine with these plans and these programs. And I'm often having to disappoint them by explaining that your hierarchy of needs is cute, but you've got to stop applying that to these people. This is not what This is not going to fulfill that need, even if this is a real need that you and I can sit down and talk coherently about.
It'd be interesting to see a graphical map of charging stations in 2 or 3 years on the interstates and see like a big void in Wyoming.
That's the thing. Are people going to avoid Wyoming? How do we do that? Is it going to have to be a private solution
in this part of the country to write a letter to the governor and the tourism board, say, hey, I was going to vacation in Wyoming this year, but since I can't refuel my car, I'm not going to visit you. So
wow, that is pretty wild. Look at that. Yeah. Can we zoom in just a little bit more? I mean, yeah, it's like, hey, come to any other state and kind of skip around Wyoming. Look at that.
Yeah.
Please stay on the outskirts.
And that's just Tesla chargers, right? Not
just Tesla. Yeah.
Yeah, just Tesla. I'm pulling up everybody.
And if you back off and show the rest of the US, you can see that there's a definite difference in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a real difference.
Look at Colorado.
Yeah. Well, again, we got 10 times the people of Wyoming, so.
Hey, no child left behind, but plenty of states left behind.
But to Paul's point, this even shows that private industry has taken up the baton and designed their own charging structure to get people through the state. And I don't see that Tesla's going to change this. They will continue to put in chargers that will help their customers traverse the state. And I imagine that Riverton and Cody will be additions at some point in the year, because it seems to be a large hole in the map at these two locations.
Yeah, I can see that.
I've pulled up the generic chargers, which would be everybody, including Tesla,
right.
And it's even more populous. So it's like, I don't see what their problem is. Let me switch back to your screen, Mark. Oh, you already gone?
Oh yeah, we're seeing that. No, I mean, there's room there. I don't know. I think change has to come from the population, and so if you want it, guess what you're gonna have to do? Talk to your legislators.
You gotta vote it.
If you
want it, you gotta vote it.
Yeah, you might actually have to not vote for an absolute reactionary. Wow, what a concept. Is that allowed in America? All right. Speaking of America, we're going to skip ahead to some place that is almost like America, California. California is like somebody picked up some other place and put it in parts of America, and it looks familiar. It's Mirror America, just some kind of weird little place. And it's a big one, though. Guess what we're doing in California? You know that self-driving car, self-driving trucks and things like that. We kind of banned them. California Assembly Bill AB 316.
Is it for safety?
They didn't want their legs broken by the Teamsters.
Excuse me.
Exactly what it is.
If you're going to get your legs broken, you want it done by professionals like the Teamsters. At least they do their violence. They do it with quality and care. These are people who understand. I am 100% pro-union.
Because now the doctor's union can put you back together.
Sorry, I had to make that joke, but go Teamsters. Now, is it for safety? Is it for safety? Now, let's see. The provision, though, is it requires a human driver to be present in an autonomous trucks while testing. And honest to God,
on the face of it,
I think that sounds pretty fair.
Testing, absolutely.
Now, what's going to happen when they're out there on the road? And I'm not saying I dislike autonomous driving trucks. I'm just saying that I've watched Maximum Overdrive. And I think like two people who are fond of weird horror movies and Stephen King movies in general know what that is, but that is where the trucks take over. Trucks and the cars. Demons, basically, I don't know, that it's never really explained. Although I've seen how we treat our cars. Can anyone blame them? No. But anyway, they also have been fighting against the expansion of robotaxi companies. The San Francisco Board of Supervisors refused a petition from Waymo to convert warehouse space to parking spaces for employees at their new facility in Southwest San Francisco. And the city is also adding some complaints to oppose the expansion of service of robotaxis with CPUC. That's California Public Utilities Commission. So it seems like there's a little bit of backlash going on in California and San Francisco. And Forbes, this article comes from Forbes, and Forbes is framing it as Ludditism. And I'm going to use a little host privilege and be a pedant about the Luddites, because I think like the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit, a lot of people misunderstand the Luddite issue. And we use Luddites today to say that someone is afraid or does not understand the technology. Basically, we do caveman poking something scary with a stick when we talk about being a Luddite. But the Luddites fully understood the technology. And one of the reasons why they did what they did and fought against the tech of their times was because they perceived a time when the technology would overshadow the worker, in the sense that it would make for more exploitation. It would reduce the ability of the worker to have a proper full-time job and have any kind of job security and job guarantees, and they wanted to fight for control over their own future and their children's futures. And I'm going to use something that seems completely different from the self-driving car. I'm talking about AI, and specifically me as a trained artist and a graphic designer and as a writer. And one of the things we're dealing with right now is the WGA's on strike, Writers Guild of America. That's TV and movies, not animation. It's a different thing. But one of the issues is that streamers in particular, but production, the development companies, American Motion Picture Theater Professionals, long complicated name. Basically what they want is they want writing contracts that allow them to have ideas generated by AI and bring in writers as contractors who will then flesh that out. And there's some level of concern, not just about the nature of writing for movie and TVs, developing characters, developing plot points. How is that affected by this? But also the level of control you get in the future. Like, do you own what you wrote? Well, that would be an adaptation. Do you get paid as an adapter of a previously written work, or do you get paid as a creator? Well, this technically would be an adaptation, so that affects your pay. And you have great writers of our time, people like Norman Lear, who is still alive at 101, still feisty. And you don't have that anymore. A TV writer's career is no longer fully existent. You can stay an assistant now for a decade and never move up the books. You'll be earning $15 an hour until you croak, or until something lucky happens. That's not how it used to be. There are no more you write for TV and you are now working for a year. It's more like you're writing for 6 to 10 episodes in a show, and then the show stops and you have to find a next gig. It's become gig work. And that's even without AI.
Put it off in the middle.
Yes. And when you're talking about artists, a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of people have adapted these new tools and they're using them already in terrible ways. Both ChatGPT and Midjourney in particular is the two biggest, most popular ones. They're taking other people's work to train the AI and then creating using prompts and coding and tweaks. Are you creating, or are you copying and kind of shaking it up in a mixer? And that's what they're doing. So there's issues with how we use technology and what we turn previously what would have been a career into essentially pay day work, day labor. You're literally raising your hand trying to be a day laborer and hoping that you can build a life on it. And the Teamsters, to say Luddites, because they don't get the greatness of this technology, I think they get it. And I think they get it better than the people promoting it, because at the end of the day, having someone who fully understands the scope of the job, who is paid to be there and is able to build a life on that job, it may seem like that's not the function of technology, but it is the function for a secure society, that we manage how we integrate technology into it. And we take into consideration that the less people able to work and afford to live, the far more unstable society becomes. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm going to throw the question out there to you guys. Tell me, are they being Luddites? Is this a bad thing?
The way
I would say that
proposed it was, I was suggesting that
that's not the case. What's happened here is that of course automated trucks don't pay union dues or taxes.
Right.
And that's going to be an issue as we eliminate people from the job force, that they're no longer doing their other jobs, and it's going to affect us adversely. If you do it in such volumes, you can really upturn the table. And as Georgia mentioned, that's society. If you're turning that many people out of work in favor of automated systems, you're going to have a real issue when it comes to society, because there's going to be a rebellion. Ultimately, you're going to have a problem controlling the peace, because people have lost their livelihoods in such numbers that society is now in jeopardy. And the Teamsters definitely think that, they probably see it from the union dues side of things, to be honest. But if there is such a number of people that get tossed out of their jobs, it's going to be society's problem. And that's something that we definitely have to guard against.
Except there's currently like 60,000 open trucking jobs right now that no one wants to take. So, it's not a career that's very rewarding for a lot of people. They're away from their family, they're on the road. It's not a desirable career. Now, maybe they need to raise the salary a lot, but then that's going to ripple through the economy. Everything you buy that arrives on a truck, which is everything, will go up in value. So it's a tough problem. And, maybe they'll figure out they'll have the long haul trucks will be automated and metro trucks will be human operated, which will be great, because the truck driver can go home to their family every night, and rather than sleeping in the back of their truck in Podunk, Wyoming,
where they just pulled over to the side of the road because they lost charge. Sorry.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 10 years in the trucking world, because young people are not going into that field like a lot of other fields, and old people are retiring. So who's going to do the job?
Right. And in building on what Paul was saying there, the jobs they're fighting over right now are the safety drivers. So once these things are at whatever level of safety to get their license, now this person is still out of a job. At least with Paul's way, now this person can work in a data center. They can be a manager level job instead of a day labor job. Just, I'm driving in a straight line, keeping it safe. I know there's more to it than that. I've got family that are truckers. But if you could now manage a fleet of 20 trucks, that one just ran over something in the road, or somebody cut this one off. All right, now I've got an active. I'm doing stuff all day long, and then you might still have somebody on the truck to load and unload it, but you'll probably have person at the warehouse on the other side loading and unloading the trailer, and then you might have somebody at the weigh station to make sure they didn't rip you off, either trying to overload your truck so it's not safe, or underload it, and or basically where you're not being paid correctly for what you did for the service. And that would solve as Paul was saying, there's a shortage. This would solve the shortage. If they were if they were fully staffed, I would be more swayed by the argument. But on the face of it, what they were saying about public safety, yes, I do agree. Public needs to be safe, but like it's to the point where these people are literally sitting in the truck for 40 hours a week, not having any interactions, just sitting there, not doing anything really. Like they could have they could get a bump and do a manager type job if they're managing a fleet versus one.
And what if they don't want that? Because honestly, being a manager sucks. And I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to throw this out there that we actually have seen the solution to this. We just don't know it. Starship Captain, your Han Solo model. Han is always with his ship when it's flying, but it's not flown by him unless it's something special. And the thing is that you're right, Paul. We got thousands of trucker jobs sitting there empty. It is hard. But part of the problem, time for those deliveries. The turnaround is ridiculous. Physical tiredness. The pay, actually, I've known truck drivers and they said the pay, but the biggest problem was the physical wear and tear of trying to stay up. And often the ones I've known who were successful at it were older people for whom they could do it as a couple. So they both were certified and they could switch off. And that did not mean driving through the night. That meant that cutting short the overall time they sat in the seat.
And also health issues. You know, you're not exercising as a truck driver. You're eating crappy, fattening food at truck stops half the time or 3/4 of the time. You know, it's hard to stay healthy in that kind of career.
That's true. But what if you had a driving partner? What if you had a partner that you could say, okay, we're going to do this and I can take my break because all I'm doing is being there in case of anything, an emergency. I can stop, I can get my leg stretches, I can calculate when the next, where the next vegan place is in Wyoming and get to that. Yeah. And when I go to sleep, I can set it on cruise for, a certain amount of time to hit my point because the roads are going to be emptier. And it makes it a far more sustainable life cycle where, a little bit more like some of my friends out in the Antarctic where they're doing solo postings where, you're there for, by yourself, but you pretty much have your own time and there's not that kind of time crunch that for a lot of them has made trucking to be more of an onerous job than it used to be. So
another model of it is, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that
our U.S. drone operators.
Solo operators,
we can do that, but also our drone operators, like they've got a pair of them. So you got the primary and then the backup, and they switch off. They stretch their legs. They can actually eat a salad. They sleep in their own beds, and they're managing 6 drones. One of them's out there loitering, and then the commander comes in and says, "Hey, I need you to blow up some terrorists or whatever," and then then you take the controls of that one drone that's overhead, and then you go back to what you were doing. That would take care of the shortage problem right there, because now you've got 2 people in one truck.
Well,
when you're still short 60,000.
How do they handle an emergency though? Because I think for a drone,
the truck would be like, "Hey, out of parameter, beep beep beep." You jump in, you take control of, like, with your wheel or your joystick or whatever you got right there. You deal with it. And then if it's like, say, if it's had a blowout or a flat, then you call roadside just like you already would do, and then they slap it on the back and be like, "Hey, you're good to go," and then you command the truck to get back on the road again.
And with all the
you're stuck in the truck while it's at a flat tire.
Oh, okay.
With all these advanced technology, yes, it's got a ways to go, but I predict 5 to 10 years from now, trucks will be smarter and safer than humans. Under 99% of the time the truck's going down the road, because the truck could be monitoring 87 variables simultaneously. A human can be monitoring 2 or 3 variables. Human gets tired.
The truck won't have a blind spot.
It's going to take some time to perfect it, but there's a lot of smart engineers trying to figure this stuff out. So
I'm
was it last year we saw the demo of the lady? She was driving the truck from like Arizona, and it was like in UK or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna open up another can of worms, because it's going to be, do we have international workers doing this?
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully they would stay within their region.
Well,
You don't want to get priced out by another
much
region.
like the situation right now with our
Hire a trucker on
AIs and the
Fiverr
fact
to
that
run your
they're,
rig for you.
yeah, we're gonna have to make sure that legislation addresses that, which is pretty much why I'm a kid, but I'm pretty on the side of the Teamsters, because we don't think about the problems until we get into the problem. And it would be nice to step back and go,
Right.
hey, these are all the variables we have to deal with. Let's scope out the problems first and see what we can come up with to resolve that in legislation before we go on ahead and say yay to all this. So,
and I'm not suggesting take the jobs away from the Teamsters. Teamsters can still do this, but
Oh,
now
yeah.
they're doing it smarter. And definitely, like Paul said, you
Maybe
don't want
a
it
more
to be
rewarding job.
international, because all of a sudden you got a guy from India or the UK and he's driving this truck on the wrong side of the road.
The thing is that, and this article in Forbes is written by Brad Templeton, and who worked on Google's car team. And my whole feeling is that it is it's very pro giving the auto driver and the robo taxis free reign. And while that's cute and everything, and when you read this article, those of you who actually go on ahead and read what we talk about, remember where the information comes from is very, you have to pay attention to that too, because the language is very pro. And once again, Teamsters are not Luddites. The Luddites were not Luddites. And we should be very cautious with what we allow with technology, because we are capable of scooting right past common sense. Actually, we don't even scoot right past common sense. We sit on a rocket and just zoom right past common sense. And then we crash into a wall and go, maybe we shouldn't have done that. And that's kind of how we learn as a society. And I'd like to not do that. At least only, maybe learning Crocs really shouldn't be worn everywhere. That would be good. But I think that was a pretty good discussion, y'all. Thank you for trying out round tabling. I thought it was going to be fun to have us just looking at a bunch of issues and jabbering our heads off. But we have hit a pretty solid 57.5 minutes. So you know what? It's time for shout outs and go home. And with that, I'm going in a reverse circle, and I'm starting with Mark.
Well, I would like to say, if you're still here, please press that thumbs up, press that subscribe if you haven't already. Helps us out immensely. And if you want to follow what happens throughout the week, just look up the social networks and look up What Drives Us. We're there, and subscribe to that, and you can find out what happens between shows. Back to you, Georgia.
All right. With that, hey, Paul, say goodbye and go home.
Yeah, I want to go home, but my day job is running Boulder Hybrids in Boulder, Colorado. We fix EVs, hybrids, sell used cars. So check us out at boulderhc.com. And thanks for tuning us in.
Casey?
Yes. So if you like these kinds of topics, you want to talk about, electrifying all the things, join me Sundays at 1:10 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com at Casey Green. That's KACEYGREEN. And we'll have a blast.
All right. And that just leaves me. Hey, I'm Georgia, and I would like to thank you guys for being here. But most importantly, I would like to thank Mark from the Tesla Life. Don't forget to follow him at the Tesla Life on all the socials here in the YouTubes and on the Twitters. And Paul, well, he's not on the socials, but don't forget to head on over to Boulder Hybrids if you haven't been buying an EV in Boulder, or if your EV needs fixing, because he's going to treat you right. And once again, Casey Green, who is GC Customs on the Twitters, and Casey Green here on YouTubes. You can also join him on the Sunday for the Sunday chat shows. And I'm Georgia McKenzie, and I ain't telling you my socials. So, but I do want to hear from you here on What Drives Us, because it's always fun to hear from you. So give us a thumbs up, give us a like, and tune in next week where we will release Russell from the closet we've kept him in, and he will be running the show again. But if you'd like to have more of these roundtable discussions, or if you have any questions, don't forget to hit us up with an email to What Drives Us, or shoot us one through Twitter, and we'll be sure to talk about it on the show. So thanks for joining us, and tune in next week to find out more of What Drives Us. Play us out, Casey.
Thanks, Michael Manring.
Thank you, Mike Manring, for this theme song. Bye, everybody.